Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Koen Colmbijn, and I'm going to present today for you on the experience design that we do at the company I work for. These are my colleagues, a collection of my colleagues. We're all very enthusiastic, as you can see. We are getting kind of bored, though, of the screen time, so I'm going to make this as fun for you and as inspiring for you as possible. This is the company that I work for, Plugged Group. We have a couple of entities, and all of them are operating in the live experience, live entertainment design events industry. And there's different things that we do, but today I'm going to talk to you about a company called Plugged Live Shows. And I would like to show you some examples of the live shows that we create. Over the last 12 years, we've had the opportunity to work for corporate events, for public festivals, for brand campaigns. And in everything we do, we have a saying at the office which goes, we are a voice and not an echo. So for every show that we do, we approach the show and the meaning behind it from the perspective of a customized, tailor-made experience. And those shows are all based on the same starting point for us as a company, which is our vision. We believe in the power of human emotions. And what that means for us is that we believe there's nothing stronger in the world than a human emotion. When you look back at your life from your deathbed, it's the moments of joy, of pleasure that you remember. It's not the money or the fame. Well, and if this is the most valuable currency there is, a human emotion, then we decided we would make it our life's journey, our mission to touch as much of people's souls as possible by the creation of meaningful memories, which are the shows that we make. A meaningful memory, what is that? Well, for us, a meaningful memory consists out of two parts. One, meaning. And meaning is what we use for branding, for marketing, for storytelling perspectives. For us, if a show doesn't have meaning, it's solely entertainment, which is fine, but that's not what Plugged Live Shows is doing. So we always start from the perspective of what the meaning for this particular experience is. And we add to that something we call fascination. Now, fascination for us is the world of theater, of aesthetics, the world of storytelling, of music. That's where the goosebumps come from, but only in combination with meaning. And again, together they form what we call a meaningful memory. And we're going to go deeper into this in a bit, because I'm going to tell you about how we stage our brand stories, which is something that we as a company do, which is also something that Hoynck is doing as a company. But I know that it's also something that everybody on the other side of the screen is doing. We stage brand stories. Hence, the subject of this presentation, Staging for Impact, a 101 in experience design. So, onto the drawing board. How do we approach the shows that we make? Well, we always work from the same triangle. Its meaning, its remarkability, and its aesthetics. I know that I just said that we combine meaning with fascination, and now all of a sudden it's a triangle. I'm going to explain that later. But everything we do is based on this particular triangle. And during this presentation, in the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to share a couple of stories that help me explain to you what exactly it is that we do. And we're going to start with the power of the rationale. After that, we're going a little bit into the science behind fascination. Then, important factor, surprise management, followed up by designing every detail. This is an important part for us. We're going to continue the story by explaining a little bit about iconography and symbolism, and ending the presentation speaking about the tension arc. So, hope you're ready. We're going to start with the power of the rationale. And in order to explain this, I'm going to tell you a story about a show that we did for a company called Lightyear. Now, Lightyear is a startup company from Eindhoven, and what they're doing is truly remarkable. They have been building for the last 10, 15 years cars that run on solar power. But the Voyager 1 is their first commercially available car, and they wanted to enter the market with that. And they asked us to introduce the car as a product launch, which we were very enthusiastic about. It's been on our bucket list to do a car show for a long time, so we were very enthusiastic. Yet, there were some things that we had to take in account. The budget wasn't as great, as big as companies like BMW or Ferrari had, yet our ambitions were basically the same. And at the same time, we understood that we had a couple of critical points to address, such as the people that were fans of the company were doubting whether the car would even run at night when there wasn't any power, sun to power the car. So there was skepticism, basically, that's what it was. And we knew we had to overcome that. So little budget, a lot of skepticism. What are we going to do in order to make this a truly remarkable, meaningful memory? And what we decided was that wouldn't it be great if we would invite all 1,200 people to the theater on a Wednesday. But instead of inviting them during the day, we would invite them on a Wednesday at 3 o'clock at night. It wouldn't cost us any extra, but by placing that meeting in their agenda at 3 o'clock at night, a month on forehand, we would be sure to get a lot of response and laughter and question marks, basically, on what we were going to do that night. And this is a picture of what we did. People would enter in the dark. They would sit down, 1,200 people, and for the full show, we stayed in a scenography, in a scenery of darkness, of stars, and we would explain all the facts about the car, everything that the car is built for, everything it could, but we didn't show it. We waited till 5 o'clock in the morning, because at that time, it was the dawn. And that was exactly the theme that we came up with for the introduction of the car. Welcome to the dawn of the Lightyear 1, because from that moment onwards, the world would be different. We would have a solar-powered car. And so when dawn appeared, we opened the doors, we drove in the car, and there, in the first light of the day, we presented the Lightyear 1. It didn't cost us any extra, but it was surely a remarkable way, a remarkable approach. And what I would like to share with you about this is that the way we look at this, the way when we do an intake with a client, we always make sure that we zoom out before we start brainstorming on what we could do. We always make sure that, you know, we drop all the assumptions and we start from scratch. So we zoom out, we look at the full spectrum that we have, and then we start brainstorming. So zoom out, point number one. Another thing that's important is start with the why. Why are we doing this event? For Lightyear, it was showing the car for the first time to the world, basically, but also kind of like showing off as what a youthful and cool company it actually was. And in order to make sure that everybody gets the goosebumps during the presentation, we make sure to connect to universal truth, meaning getting up at 2 o'clock at night to get to a theater, to be there at 3, is a weird situation for everybody. That's something that lives, that's something that you feel, that's something that you experience, that's true. It doesn't have anything to do with the facts of the Lightyear 1, how far it can drive, how fast it is. It's something that's the same for everybody. So make sure that whenever you create a rationale, connect to the universal experiences. Because it's not the facts of the product that touch your soul, but it's the emotion that it provokes. And this is what we call, and the world calls, emotive branding. So, on to the next story, the science behind fascination. And fascination is a fascinating thing. For us, it exists out of different components. And if you look at the dictionary, what is said about fascination, it says, fascination is defined as something that attracts or intrigues someone. Attracts or intrigues someone. So what we broke this down to is that, there's meaning, there's fascination, but fascination actually exists out of two entities, which is aesthetics and remarkability. Aesthetics attract, remarkability intrigues. So, knowing that, what happens in your brain when something unpredictable happens? So when something happens that fascinates you. What we can see here on the top is that you get brain activity in the brain center that is also a reference to joy, and actually drugs will give you the same effect as what fascination does. There's been an amazingly interesting study done by a neuroscientist called Bo Lotto, and he did that together with a company you all might know, Cirque du Soleil. And they found that they would actually, like if they attach people's brain waves to artificial intelligence, then the artificial intelligence was capable of predicting to a percentage of 86% whether people were experiencing a fascinating moment. And that's the brain waves. Basically your brain goes bizarre at that moment, which is cool because what they also found is that at that moment you can convey a meaning, you can convey a message which sticks. Now, how do we create something which is fascinating? Well, there's different ways to go about that. Recontextualizing and scaling, making something that is normally very big, very small, or vice versa. Treat every element as a character of space. What we did with Lightyear is we gave the sun the role of the main character. So it was all based on the sun. The sun is a character of space. Create contrast. So that can be either in colors, in size, you name it. And when all of those are working together, we can orchestrate an emotion, we can orchestrate a mood, we can orchestrate an atmosphere, and that's basically what we're in the line of business of. This is a picture of Jeff Koons, and what Jeff Koons does is he's an artist, and he created this balloon dog, and he placed it in the palace or the castle of the sun god of France, Prince Mr. Lodewijk, number 14, I believe it was. And this was given a lot of response because it was, but contrast by far, it was a balloon dog, which is normally a toy for children, blown up to a full size. So this was contradiction. And it was given a lot of press. This is fascinating. People look at it, and you can, think of it whatever you like, but it fascinates you nonetheless. And you see, there's always people who can do it bigger. This is Kanye West on his world tour, and he decided to use that dog and use that idea and to blow it up even further. Which leaves us with the question, what exactly is art? But I only have 7 more minutes left, so let's not go into that at the moment. Let's go to the next part of this presentation, which is surprise management. You see, one of the most important things in our line of business, the element of surprise. You see, surprise is extremely important. Surprise is the greatest gift that life can grant us. And that means is that we as a show creator, we as an experiential studio, we use surprise to make people be in awe. And we do that based on the idea that life itself is predictable. Every day we wake up, there's a certain amount of things that you do in the morning, and especially now that we're also leaning a lot on big data, all the marketing and all the scrolling that we do, it's all predictable. But we crave the unexpected. When we go to a theme park, when we go to the circus, when we go out with friends, it's the unexpected that we're looking for. And so the moment our brains are opened up by surprise is the moment where we're most vulnerable for making memories. So surprise is actually a very powerful marketing tool. There's an interesting book, there's a million books written about this, but one of them is written by Seth Godin, which is The Purple Cow. Interesting read. You drive across the street, there's cows everywhere, but once you see a purple one, that's something you remember. There's a guy who used to be in the business of haute couture. His name is Alexander McQueen. I'm a big fan of his. And he was the first one to combine show elements in his haute couture fashion shows. And with that, he also used the elements of surprise. And this is a video of a performance of his. It took place at the end of the 90s. And what he did was he connected, or he introduced robotic arms to a fashion show performance, and this was front news in the newspapers in London. Extremely well done. So, next one, designing every detail. Important one for us, designing every detail, because the only way you can make an experience stick is if you enable the audience to immerse themselves in the reality of that particular moment. You can see that the Efteling, everything they do is based on realism, although it is very fantasy-like. And this is exactly what happens when you go to the movies. You go to the movies to enter a new fascinating world that illuminates our daily reality. So we mimic reality, and reality is in the details. And when we create a show, there's a lot of different elements that we use in order to fake a reality. It's makeup, it's animation, it's motion, it's video content, sonography, you name it. These are basically the building blocks that we use in the creation of our shows. And everything that you do design, you can use for brand objects. I think I'm a huge fan of making sure that whatever you create is not thrown away, but reused. Because every object that you create is, from that moment onwards, something that makes people remember that meaningful memory. All right, on to the next, symbolism and iconography. Quite important to us. We were asked by a company from the Middle East whether we would be so kind as to create an opening moment for a show that we did in Tokyo. And the opening moment was to represent the thankfulness of the company from the Middle East towards the Japanese in general. There were quite some high esteemed guests there. And so what we thought of was to create an ode to the Japanese flag. And what we did is we created a sphere, a round sphere, three-dimensional sphere based on 50,000 blossom petals, as it was blossom season at that time in Japan, symbolism. And to that we added a round see-through white curtain, and by doing so creating a three-dimensional Japanese flag. So people would enter and would see this installation art almost. They would look at it and we would then use it in order to surprise the people and made a gesture to the Japanese culture. So we dropped the white curtain, we dropped the blossom petals, and by doing so we introduced Ayaka Ishikaya, one of the most famous violinists from Japan. So, symbolism and iconography. Images, objects and symbols is where you find meaning as a brand. We all know the Nike swoosh, and we all know symbols of brands that we love. It's an abstract way of translating a message. You know, people would only need to see that logo or that icon or that symbol and understand what that symbol is representing. So, that was symbolism and iconography. Let's go into the subject of the tension arc, because this is where everything comes together and where we create actual goosebumps. The tension arc. What we see here is a representation of the music from Beethoven. And Beethoven created his 7th symphony, starting off only with a couple of instruments, a violin, a cello, and he would create his music for the first couple of minutes within this symphony only with those instruments, whilst at the same time having a full orchestra at his opposal. When you listen to this, and I would like to ask you all to do it because it's a beautiful piece of art, he starts with just a violin and he builds it slowly, 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 slowly towards this one moment where all of a sudden the full orchestra kicks in. This is what we should do as experienced designers. When people enter a venue, from that moment onwards, show them only a violin and be very careful about when you add extra instruments to the mix, because it's the moment where you're conveying your message, where you actually want that full orchestra to join in and make sure that you fascinate people and making those brain waves work. So, a story is built, composing a selection of events into a strategic sequence. Arouse specific emotions or express a message. And there's no one greater at that, besides Beethoven, as I just said, than Alfred Hitchcock. There's no terror in the bang, it's only in the anticipation of it. If you haven't seen Birds, or if you haven't seen the famous shower scene, you should, because then you learn that the actual scary moment is not where the actual attack takes place. It's the moment where you realize that at some point it is going to happen, and in the anticipation of it. And that's the tension arc. So, these are the elements that we use in order to create a brand experience. I hope it was interesting to you all, and that you've learned a lot. Before we go, this is an online event, so you're looking at me via a screen. And all that I've been talking about, of course, were live experiences. I can, however, tell you that it's very much possible to make experiences happen through the screen. So it's very possible to create meaningful memories via a digital event. And if you want to know some examples of this, we did a roundtable discussion this morning where some of them were discussed. So I would like to invite you to have a look at that discussion. And I would like to end with a quote from S. Devlin, who is one of the world's most famous stage designers. She works for Beyoncé, she works for the opera. The thing about what I make is it doesn't exist for very long. Their endurance is in the memory of the people who saw them. So what she's doing is making meaningful memories. And I'm looking forward to doing that again soon. Thank you very much.